Is reincarnation real? In this video, I'm going to be talking about rebirth, karma, past lives, parallel realities, the illusion of time and separation, and the reality of consciousness and oneness. Now, to begin, I want to start off by sharing a little bit about how I grew up believing in the afterlife and then what eventually led me to change my mind about that belief, which had a lot to do with my own experiences and stuff that I learned later on in life. And then lastly, where I am today, how I see it today, how I view it today. Okay, so I grew up Christian, and growing up Christian, my belief of the afterlife was the traditional dualistic notion of a literal heaven and a literal hell. And so the belief was that Christians, when they died, they would go to heaven and they would worship Jesus forever and they would experience eternal peace and joy and bliss. But on the other hand, those who were not Christians, the unbelievers, when they died, they would face divine judgment and they would be sent to this place called hell, which was separation from God, and they would experience eternal conscious torment with no opportunity for escape, no opportunity for repentance. That's what I believed about the afterlife because that's what I was taught about the afterlife. And everyone else around me in my Christian community believed in this. And I was told that this is what the Bible says and this is what the Bible teaches, so you better believe the Bible. So I did. But then I got to a point in college where I started to rethink my faith and I started to question so many of the different doctrines and teachings and dogma that I learned in church. And one of the main areas that I started to question and rethink was this whole area of what happens after death. And this is when I got into studying some of the Eastern traditions and I started to learn about some of the different views of what happens in the afterlife from the other traditions, from those perspectives. And I was amazed because growing up as a Christian, the only view of the afterlife that I even considered was what I was hearing in church and what I was being taught as a Christian. But now learning that these other traditions had different ideas and different views, and many of these views were ancient views and beliefs and ideas about the afterlife that preceded Christianity and what we read about in the Bible. And so this was all very fascinating to me. And I was curious, I wanted to learn more. And at this point in my life, I was coming out of Christian fundamentalism and I was stepping into more of a mystical spirituality. So I was starting to practice meditation. I was actually reading the Christian mystics, which, by the way, I didn't even know existed when I was a Christian fundamentalist. But apparently, what I discovered was that there were Christians who were experiencing oneness with God by going within instead of relying externally on a church and an external holy book and a pastor or a priest. And so the path of mysticism is all about realizing that God is not a distant deity up in the sky somewhere, but God is infinite, God is within everyone and everything, and anyone can experience the divine presence because we are one with God and the divine nature is what we are. We are divine. And so that's the path of mysticism. It's going within through meditation, through some kind of contemplative prayer and experiencing oneness with God. And then immense transformation comes from that. And so I start reading about this, like I said, in the Christian mystics, St. Teresa of Avila, St. John of the Cross, Meister Eckhart, many others. And I'm inspired. I want to experience what they're experiencing. And so I started practicing meditation. I started learning more about contemplative prayer, like I was saying. And this became my new approach to spirituality and to God. But I still had the question of, well, what happens after death? Because this new mysticism, and it's not new, it was new for me, but mysticism is very, very ancient. And we find it in many of the Eastern traditions that come well before Christianity. But it was new for me at the time, and it was transforming my life, and I wanted more of it because for me it was just answering so many questions, and it was giving me fulfillment, and it was giving me this new sense of meaning and what the spiritual journey is all about. And so I wanted more of it. And as I continued down this path, as I started to meditate more, I started having these very profound experiences where I would get into these deep meditative states. And I started to realize that I am, like I said earlier, that I'm not separate from God, but that I'm one with God. And then I started having these visions, and then it seemed as though my dream life was being transformed. So I started to have these extraordinary dreams, and during these dreams, which some of these dreams that I were having were lucid dreams, I started to encounter these people, these beings in the dream or during a vision while I was in a deep meditative state. And when I would encounter a person or, like I said, some kind of a being in these dreams and these visions, it seemed as though I like during the experience, during the dream, during the vision, it felt like I've known this person forever. There was this familiar feeling. There was this remembrance that would just occur during the experience. And then when I would wake up from the dream, when I would come out of the meditative state, I would come back into my conscious mind, and that veil of forgetfulness would come back, and then I would just kind of, like forget about the whole thing, and I couldn't remember. And I remembered being in a position, being in an experience where everything seemed so familiar, and it felt like I've known this person forever. But then when I came out of it, I like forgot, and it just became very cloudy, and I lost, like I said, I just couldn't remember it. And the same thing happened during these dreams that were very real, very vivid. And same thing with visions during meditation, where I would encounter these places where when during the dream, when I would experience this place, this location, I've never been there before in my life, in this lifetime. But in the dream, I knew intuitively, I felt like I had been to this particular location. It felt very familiar. It felt like I had spent a lot of time in these certain locations and places. And so after I started having these experiences, I started writing many of these down, and I wanted to know what was going on, because I have had dreams my entire life, but up until this point, I had never had an experience where I had a dream or I had a vision in meditation or something where I was encountering a person or I was at a location that felt like I had been there before. I could remember it, and there was that sense of connection and resonance, like I'm saying, when I was having the dream, when I was having the vision in that experience. And so this was very fascinating to me, and I wanted to know more what was going on. And at the time, I was still very open-minded, and I didn't know what I was going to believe about the afterlife. I was just enjoying meditation and the mystical practices, and reading some of the Christian mystics and the Eastern mystics, and learning about the ancient yogic traditions. And Paramahansa Yogananda, his book, The Autobiography of a Yogi, really inspired me. I read that, and I was learning about all the miracles and just the supernatural life that he lived, and the foundation of his life and everything that he was doing was really stemming from his meditation practice. So again, this was inspiring me even more. But he started teaching about reincarnation, and some of his teachers, some of his gurus that I was reading about in his book, had their perspective of reincarnation and karma and how that works. And so again, during this time of my life, I'm very open. I'm wanting to learn more and more about how this whole notion of this whole concept of reincarnation works. And what I realized was that as I was learning more about reincarnation and karma and past lives and all these different things, what I realized was that growing up as a Christian, I had so many different preconceived notions of what I thought reincarnation was, because, I'd hear reincarnation from friends and on TV and stuff. And I guess there were so many different like cliches and stereotypes and even negative connotations that were attached to what reincarnation was. And so I remember like joking around and hearing people say things like, oh, reincarnation is if you're bad and you die, then you come back as a frog, or you come back as a bird, or you come back as a rock. But if you're good, then when you die, you come back as a millionaire or as a successful person, and you live this great life. And so that's really all I knew, or that's what I thought reincarnation was at the time. But when I started to study it from these ancient spiritual traditions, when I started learning the history and the origin of it, especially, I didn't realize that this model of the afterlife, reincarnation, is one of the oldest models of the afterlife that we have. And so, it dates back to the ancient India. We find it in the Vedas, which I think the Vedas date back to about 1500 BC. And then we find it in the Upanishads, which is about 800 to 400 BC. We find it in ancient Greece in the writings of some of the philosophers like Pythagoras and Plato. And apparently Pythagoras had this ability to remember his past lives. And so this is all brand new to me at the time. I'm really interested. I'm intrigued. And so, like I said, I'm reading about it. I'm learning about it from the Eastern traditions, from the ancient spiritual traditions, and then I'm learning about the history of it. I'm really fascinated at how old it is, and to me, that was something to really consider. Like, why has this idea, why has this model of the afterlife been around for so long? And then I start reading stories about people, children, who could remember their past lives. And then I start reading stories about people that are having near-death experiences. And during their near-death experiences, they're being shown past lives. And they're being, taught these things like the reason reincarnation exists and the reason the reason you're being shown your past lives is because the whole point in this is for your soul's evolution. It's you're on a journey. You're returning back to source consciousness. You're returning back to oneness with God. And there's lessons to be learned. There's experiences that you have to go through. And it's all for your good. It's all for your development. It's all for your growth. It's all for your transformation. And it's all for this greater journey of returning back home to source consciousness. And this is when I really became interested because, viewing reincarnation, this model of reincarnation, what it did for me was it showed me that there were other perspectives of the afterlife that I could consider, that I could believe in if I wanted to believe in these different perspectives. And the thing that really got me with reincarnation was there was a point to it. There was meaning behind it. There was a goal, and there was this greater plan. And one of the main things that I started to have a problem with the whole dualistic notion of a heaven and a hell, and you live for however long you live, 70 to 80 years if you're lucky, and then you face divine judgment, and then after that, then you either go to heaven forever or hell forever. One of the problems I started to have with this belief was that it didn't make sense, and it wasn't just, it wasn't fair. Like, how can the punishment for sins committed in a, let's just say, 70 to 80 year lifespan be eternal conscious torment? That is not just. That is not fair. That doesn't make sense. And, I started thinking about things like, why would God create a reality in the first place? God is all powerful. God is all knowing. Why would God create a reality in the first place where he knew that the majority of the people that he creates, billions and billions and billions of people, would go through this time period on earth, which is temporary, and it's really short compared to eternity. So they would go through this earth realm, they would suffer, they would go through the hell that we go through on earth. And then if they don't believe in the right thing, if they don't figure it out, if they don't apply the correct salvific method to their life, if they don't get saved, then they go to hell forever and they experience eternal conscious torment with no escape. To me, that just didn't make any sense. And again, it became very problematic for me because how can we say that this is a loving God who created a reality where he knew beforehand that the majority of the people that he creates would not accept him, would not want to be in relationship with him, and that they would just suffer on earth and then suffer forever in hell? It just, like, what's the point of that? And so reincarnation, this model of reincarnation, was giving me this different perspective, this different view of, no, this is not how reality actually is. As far as like the belief, the perspective of, like I just mentioned, where God created this reality and you get a short lifetime compared to eternity. You get a few years or however many years you live on earth. That's your opportunity. That's your one chance, your one opportunity. If you don't get it right, if you don't believe in the right thing, if you don't join the right religion and apply the correct salvific method, the correct salvific formula to your life, if you don't get saved and all the conditions. If you don't jump through all the hoops, if you don't make it, then that's it. Then you're going to face eternal reward or eternal punishment based upon that reality. What I learned, what I was starting to discover, was that there are other ways to view reality and God and what God is and how the afterlife works. And so that's what reincarnation was doing for me. It was giving me a brand new perspective that actually made sense. And I'm not saying that I agreed with everything that I was learning right from the beginning of my journey with studying reincarnation, but it made more sense in the sense of, okay, the way it works is you don't just have one opportunity, you have many opportunities, you have many lives, you have many experiences, and it's all about some kind of a greater growth, and it's or yeah, journey and development, and there's purpose behind it, and there's karma. But karma is another thing that has been extremely misunderstood, and there's so many negative connotations around it, and there's different cliches and stereotypes that are attached to it. But I think with karma, the misconception of karma is that, oh, karma is you live your life, and if you do bad things, if you harm others, then your next life is horrible, and it's your punishment for your current life. And that kind of goes back to, if that's how we're going to view karma, it kind of goes back to the old paradigm of, oh, there's a deity that's judging us, and depending on what we do in this life, our punishment is we are born again into this new incarnation in this new lifetime, but our next life entails a tremendous amount of suffering as punishment for what we did in our past life. But I think that's an inaccurate way to view karma. Again, there is no deity in the sky that's judging us, that's determining what our next life is going to be based upon our current life and what we did and didn't do. I think the way karma actually works is that it's not that we're punished for our sins, we're punished by our sins. Even if you want to call it sins, it could just be, doing harmful things to others. But we're not punished for our sins, we're punished by our sins. What does that mean? Well, the sin is the punishment. If we're choosing to live out of alignment with love and compassion and kindness and unity consciousness, if we're going against that, then we are going to have to experience the consequences of that. Why? Because in this whole model of reincarnation and karma, what we learn is that everything is interconnected, and this is actually what quantum physics is telling us, that everything is one. Separation is an illusion. We are one with God and one with everything and everyone. And so what does that mean? Well, that means that what you do to others, you are actually doing to yourself, because you are one, you are interconnected. And this is actually what Jesus taught. And so the whole sowing and reaping principle, we find that in the teachings of Jesus. And Jesus makes statements like, love your neighbor as yourself. And the way I interpret that is the recognition that your neighbor is yourself, or one with yourself. And do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Why? Because we're all one. So that's, I think, the better way to view karma. It's not that we're being judged by some kind of external deity. No, it's when we step out of alignment with love, with unity consciousness, with oneness, with compassion and kindness, and living how we know to live intuitively. When we step away from that and we go against that, then we have to face the consequences, because we are doing it to ourselves, either in this current lifetime or a future lifetime, or at some point in a lifetime beyond that. So that's the way I think karma actually works. And so with that in mind, in that perspective, to me, it just makes a lot more sense. And if karma is some kind of universal law that's built into reality, then the ultimate goal of it is not retributive punishment. It's correction and growth and development. And we learn from our mistakes, and then we get a second chance and another chance and another chance to grow and to become better and to evolve. That's what it's all about. That's what reincarnation is all about. It's all about evolving. Now, the bigger picture of reincarnation is that basically God is all that exists. God is one, And I don't really like using that word God when I'm talking about this, because God, I think, has this connotation, this old perspective of a deity up in the sky, like a mythological figure, a mythological deity. But that's not what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about God, I'm talking about source consciousness. I'm talking about not a being, but being itself, infinite being. And if it's infinite, what does that mean? That means that it's beyond the finite mind, and there's not a line, there's not a box that we can say, okay, this is God and this is not God. God is everything and nothing, as the mystics have said. And so when we view God this way, what does that mean? That means that God is not separate from us, but God is one with us, and we are arising from source consciousness. Our soul, our spirit, whatever you want to call it, is an expression, is an emanation of the one. And so what is taught, what is believed, is that the one God, source consciousness, that exists outside of this linear function of time, which, by the way, time is an illusion, and I'll get to that in a second. But God exists in this eternal now. It's the I am presence. It's the true self. It's the original face, as they say in Zen Buddhism. And again, it's essentially what we are fundamentally at the core. But this is the belief, is that the one divided itself up into the many simply for the sake of knowing itself more intimately and in infinite ways. And so this whole dividing itself up into the many is not actually what is happening. It's the dream of God. It's the illusion of separation, but it's the only way God could know itself in more ways. And it's the only way God could know itself at all, because the only way God could know itself is if there was another, and two different points of views, two different perspectives to know, to have relationship, to have experience. And so that is what the belief is in many of the different reincarnation models and views. And so what we are is basically source consciousness in this localized form, but we're not really localized. Again, this is the dream of God. This is this illusion of separation that is being experienced temporarily. But that's essentially what the soul is. The soul is source consciousness, the divine, in this localized form. But this is just from one perspective. This is just from one point of view. If we go beyond this one perspective, if we go beyond this one point of view, then we see that all is one and separation is an illusion. But from this other point of view, from this other perspective, we are in this God dream, and we are experiencing duality and separation. And the whole point of it is for God, which is what we are fundamentally, we are divine, to know itself more intimately and in infinite ways. And it's beyond the finite mind, beyond anything we can imagine. But the whole point of this journey as a soul is the soul leaves oneness, the soul leaves pure consciousness, and it goes and basically, there's different beliefs, there's different teachings on this, but one of the other books I started to become interested in was The Law of One, which is a channeled book. And in this book, it talks about the different densities of consciousness, and this is kind of the path or the journey that the soul will take in this dream of God. And the whole point is for the soul, which is what we are from one perspective, from one dimension, from one realm. The whole point of the soul going on this journey is to ultimately return back to source. But along the journey, there's all these different lessons being learned that are a part of the journey that are aiding in the soul's development and growth and transformation to higher densities of consciousness. In every lifetime that the soul is incarnating is meaningful. There's a purpose behind it. There's things being learned. There are experiences that are happening, and it's really extraordinary. And with the soul, like I said, the whole point is, free will comes in, and this is where there's different views and opinions, but free will comes in and there's choice. And at one point in this journey of the different densities, this is when the self-awareness comes in, the consciousness of the soul, and this is when different things start to happen. But, Ram Dass said this. He said, "We're all just walking each other home." And I think that's a beautiful quote. And I think that quote does a good job of explaining this whole process of reincarnation and karma, and what it actually is, and why it's happening. And so, to me, when I started learning about this, and I started to, like I said, have my own experiences, and then I started learning and reading about these other people, like I mentioned, who were having past life memories. And some of these things that I was reading were people who were going through past life regression, who were not born with past life memories, inherently, but eventually they started to remember because they started going through these past life regressions. And then I started reading about these stories of these children who, at a very young age, can remember their past lives in very vivid detail. And if you read some of these stories, they're fascinating. Like the memory and the detail and the specifics that these children are having in these stories are incredible. And it's like this stuff just can't. There's no way that these stories are being made up. It's like they can't be made up. And of course, it's good to read and listen to these stories with an open mind and an open heart, and to question everything and to do your own research. But at some point, you get to a place when you're going through all these thousands of stories and reports of people who have had past life memories. You get to a point when you're going through all this and you're like, okay, there's no way that all of this is just made up. There's got to be something more to this. And so you keep a healthy balance of being skeptical and questioning, but you also you're open, and you're listening to your own intuitive heart, and you're seeing what stories resonate and which ones do not, and you go from there. Now, a question that often comes up is, well, why can't we all remember our past lives, and why do only some people have past life memories and past life experiences and all of that? And I think, well, what happens is when we come into a particular incarnation, we go through this veil of forgetfulness where we forget what the past lives that we had were. And I think the whole point in that is because if we could remember all of our past lives and all of our past experiences, then what we come here to do in this particular incarnation, in this particular lifetime, would be very challenging, because we'd be dealing with all these memories and past traumas and sufferings from many past lives with all the stuff we're dealing with in this particular current incarnation, in this current lifetime, and it would just make things very difficult. And again, we come here forgetting everything, not knowing what happened before this particular birth, and this makes this experience, this particular lifetime, even more real and more meaningful. And it's all a part of the purpose of why we're here right now in this particular experience, in this particular lifetime. So, but this veil of forgetfulness is thinner for some people. Why? I don't know. There's different theories on this, but for some people, this veil is thinner, and they, like I said, they even start remembering their past lives from a very early age in vivid detail, with great description. Or later on in life, these past life memories start to come up, whether either through meditation or through some kind of past life regression. Why is it like this, and why is it different for everyone? I don't know the answer, but I do think it is something to be open to and to explore and to consider. So that's my thoughts on that. Now, I do want to say this. One thing that I started learning about during my process of deconstruction and reconstruction and learning about mysticism and meditation was that time doesn't actually exist. Time is a mental construct. It's a tool that we use here in this 3D earth realm, but it's not ultimate reality. Time is not absolute. And I started learning and reading about what Einstein discovered about time. And then I started reading certain teachers like Eckhart Tolle, and he has this great book called The Power of Now. And what I realized through all of this was that the now, the present moment, is all that really exists. This is the eternal now. And the past and the future are just really an illusion that's occurring in the now. So the past is a thought or a memory that is occurring right here, right now. You can't go back into the past. You can't go back into yesterday and do something that you forgot to do. No, because there's just the now. So the past, any kind of memory, any kind of thought about yesterday or what happened a week ago or a month ago or a year ago is occurring in the now. Same thing with the future. The future is just a thought or an expectation or an anticipation that is occurring right here, right now. The now is all that there is. And so with that in mind, the question is, well, how do past lives work? How does reincarnation work if everything is happening simultaneously in this one eternal now moment? Well, it all depends on your point of view. It all depends on your perspective. In this third dimension, or from the fourth dimension, where there's souls and there's the other, and there's this illusion of separation, well then, yeah, from that perspective, the appearance of reincarnation and past lives seems to be true. But if we go beyond that, if we transcend to higher dimensions and we view it from a broader perspective of what actually is, and we see that everything is one and time is an illusion, and that the present moment, the eternal now, is all that exists, then we see that the past lives are actually not past lives or past experiences. They're actually parallel lives, parallel experiences. Everything is happening all in this one eternal now moment. And so what could be happening when people have past life memories is they're actually tapping into the vibrational frequency, the energetic frequency of a parallel reality, of a parallel life. And that is what is giving them this appearance, this experience of a past life. But it's actually happening, like I said, all in this one eternal now moment. And so this is something that can get complicated and hard to understand, so I don't want to get too much into it. But from this higher perspective, from this higher point of view, from what is actually happening, this is what is going on. It's not that there's actually past lives and future lives in this linear function of time, because this linear function of time is not ultimate reality. Again, it's something that is occurring in the third dimension. We need it for this earth realm, but beyond that, there's timelessness. Beyond that, there is no time. And so from this realm of no time and everything happening all at once, this is how we have to understand what past lives really are, and parallel lives, parallel realities. This is what is actually happening. Also, we are all one. That is the reality beyond the dimension that we're in right now. And so if we go to a higher point of view, a higher perspective of what actually is, from unity consciousness, from oneness, what we find is that separation is an illusion. Like I keep saying, everything is interconnected. So it could be that past lives are simply us having memories, having thoughts, having experiences. Again, everything is connected because everything is energy, and energy is connecting all things, right? So Nikola Tesla said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. So that's how we have to view this. And so if everything is interconnected, if everything is energy, then we can have memories from our ancestors and from other people that we were connected to, family members, friends, and just who knows, anyone, because we're all one, we're all interconnected. And there's this collective consciousness. And so that's what we have to keep in mind. That is reality. That is what is actually going on. And we can see that and we can experience that when we transcend to higher dimensions and when consciousness evolves to the higher densities. But in this density, in this dimension, in the third dimension, we're still in this illusion of separation, this dream of God, this veil of forgetfulness. And it's hard for us to see it and to understand what is actually happening. So at one level it is true, but if we go beyond that, then we see that that is just one perspective, that is just one point of view from that particular dimension. And so this is something that was really intriguing and fascinating for me, because when I understood that time doesn't actually exist in this linear function that I was believing in, then I realized that everything is indeed happening in this one eternal now. And parallel lives, parallel realities are actually the more accurate way to describe what's happening when we do have past life memories. And yeah, I don't, like I said, I don't want to get too much into this, but this is the perspective of reincarnation that I started to have. And then, there's different ideas about, well, is there conscious reincarnation in the sense of, when you die, there's the belief that when you die in between incarnations, you go to the astral plane, which is a higher realm, a higher dimension beyond this earth plane. You go there and you have a life review, and you kind of go through what you just experienced in your previous life. And then based upon that, you consciously choose what your next life will be, where you will live, who your parents will be, what you'll have to go through, what you'll have to experience. And again, it's based upon what you just experienced, past karma. And then, so it's you choosing what's going to happen next. That's one perspective. That's one view. The other view is that there is no conscious choosing in between lives, in between incarnations, and that it's all just vibration and frequency. And so whatever your vibrational frequency is when you die in one life, that somehow is transferred over to your next life, and that's how it all works. And so the energy aligns with another frequency, and then somehow that determines like what you're going to experience and all the different things. So I don't know exactly how that works. I have my own theory, my own opinion, but I don't want to get too much into that today. I just wanted to share a little bit with you about the different perspectives on it. So yeah, this is something, like I said, that really fascinated me, and I'm still learning a lot about it, and it has really transformed the way I see myself and others and God and the afterlife, and I'm continuing on this path, and I think it makes a lot more sense than the other models of the afterlife. And I think there's a lot more for us to learn about it, to grow in this area, to discover. And so we need to be open-minded. We can't get dogmatic about saying that this is exactly how it happens and this is definitely how the process is and this and that and the other. I mean, you can approach it like that, but all I'm saying is I think it's wise to remain open and to study all the different perspectives and views, and to ultimately decide for yourself what you want to believe, and allow your own experiences and allow your own time doing your own research and your own homework to determine what you believe and how you view the afterlife and this whole notion of reincarnation and karma and past lives and all of this. So yeah, I want to hear what you think. So please leave your comments in the comment section below. Share maybe a little bit about your perspective on reincarnation, and maybe share if you've had some kind of past life experience, what that was like for you, and how that has impacted and influenced your current life, and how it has caused you to grow, and all the things. And then if you disagree with this, or if you have a different perspective where you think there's a better model for the afterlife and how reality works and all of that, I want to hear that as well. So I'm open, and I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions and comments. So please leave them below in the comment section, okay? And if you found this video helpful, informative, or insightful, please leave a thumbs up at the bottom of the screen, and be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.